Welcome to the Darkstream. Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and the author of Jordanetics, which is exactly what we're going to talk about tonight. I'm sorry I am a bit late. That was not my intention, but I really need to remember to start charging up my my camera or get an extra battery pack or something soon. Thanks for the super chats yesterday, and I noticed that there were already one or two tonight. I will address the super chats, but I'm going to hit them after we talk about the subject at hand. So, go ahead and leave them as you wish, but I need to stay focused on what we're talking about here. Otherwise, we're going to be floating all over the place. So tonight, what we're talking about is the second rule from 12 Rules for Life. And I address this in, I believe it's the 7th chapter of Jordanetics. If you haven't read it yet, I have the book right here. This is the book that we're discussing tonight. A lot of people who have been talking about the videos and responding to my videos about Jordan Peterson have been claiming that in my videos, I don't address what Jordan Peterson is saying. And in certain videos, that's correct. This is where I address his specific arguments in considerable detail. So don't be under the impression that I don't know about them, that I haven't addressed them, etc., etc. Also, it's available now in audiobook. The link is below the video. And we're also going to we've also modified our audiobooks. We're now using high quality MP4 files. They're 4 times the quality of the audio files that you get from Audible. And it's a single file. It works with all kinds of readers. It turned out to be a better option than just the straight up MP3 files. I'm actually going to go ahead and answer this super chat right now from the Dashing Rogue. I'm going to gift Jordan B. Peterson Jordanetics when I see him. What should I ask him? The 3 most important questions in the most important order that I should ask. I actually have a list of 12 questions for Jordan Peterson in the appendix of the book. I think it's Appendix B. Let's see here. Yeah. Appendix B, 12 questions for Jordan Peterson. But what I would ask him first, just because it's so important to everyone, my very first question for Jordan Peterson, and I didn't have it in the book there, but what would be my number 1 question for Jordan Peterson right now is, what was your LSAT score? I guarantee you he knows what it is. Absolutely, he knows what it is. And so it would be very interesting to see if he would answer that in a straightforward manner, because that would be very, very important with regards to how seriously his followers take him. So let's start with rule number 2. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. And the subtitle is, why won't you just take your damn pills? Now, here's what's really interesting. And this is the quote that I began the chapter of Jordanetics with. And I think that it's very important, because a lot of people don't understand that Jordan Peterson really isn't that smart. And I'm not saying that in a ad hominem manner. I'm saying that so you understand that he doesn't really know what he's talking about. And when he tries to reach conclusions, he's often doing so incorrectly. Now, I referred to this chapter as the bad math of balance. And I begin with a quote from Jordan Peterson, which I have here for you. Did I fail any classes in university? I had to retake stats. I wasn't good at stats. I got it eventually. At least I understand the statistics now. So yeah, I didn't do very well in statistics. That's a direct quote from Dr. Jordan Peterson. Why does it matter? Isn't this ad hominem? No. This explains why Jordan Peterson gets the statistics fundamentally wrong when he's investigating why you won't take your damn pills. Who doesn't take your damn pills? Who needs to take pills? Well, the interesting thing is that, first of all, if you combine rule number 2 with rule number 1, it clearly tells you how or who Jordan Peterson is addressing. He's addressing people who are low status, and now he's addressing people who have to take their pills. He's addressing people who have such big problems that they have to take medication for their mental issues. And so now what's interesting here is he says, imagine that 100 people are prescribed a drug. Consider what happens next. 1/3 of them won't fill this prescription. Now he's basing this on something that is totally false. The study he cites was actually reported that 31.3% of the prescriptions written were not filled. Okay? He's confusing the prescriptions with the patients. It isn't true that 33.3% of patients who are prescribed medication don't fulfill their prescriptions, let alone not take them. And in fact, if he had actually, we don't even know the actual number because there were 37,506 prescriptions written for 15,961 patients. So if you just did the math and you said, well, 1/3 of the 40,000 weren't filled for 15,000 people, right? Except no. The problem is lots of people who take medication have to take more than one medication. And in fact, the kind of people who are the least likely to take medication are the people with mental issues, mental illnesses. And this is something that I pointed out in the book. Schizophrenics, in a study of schizophrenics, it was found that 37.1% of them do not adhere to their advised medication regimen. But the ridiculous thing is that if you look at what Peterson is saying, he's saying that actually that 2/3 of all people don't take their medication, 1/3 don't fill the prescription, and even more don't take it. But it's not true. It's absolutely not true. His claim of 66% non-compliance by the general population is nearly twice that of non-compliant schizophrenics. And the other funny thing is that 45% of the general population is not regularly prescribed medication in the first place. So even if the general population is as non-compliant with its medical regime as schizophrenics, which is not the case, but we're being as generous as possible, that means Peterson's advice is only applicable to 20% of the population. And what Peterson's doing is the same thing that he does again and again and again, which is that he takes a singular example and then he applies it universally. He does this over and over and over again. Somebody asked me, would you debate Jordan Peterson? I absolutely would debate Jordan Peterson. There is absolutely no chance that Jordan Peterson is ever going to debate me, because I have thoroughly and utterly exposed him on that, on many things. This is just a start. Remember, we've already done one video on rule number 1. This is only on rule number 2. So when you're reading his book, you need to understand that he takes his false assumptions and his mathematical errors, and then he compounds them because he starts philosophizing and theorizing from these false foundations. And so, interestingly enough, despite the fact that everyone thinks that Peterson is about taking control of yourself, he actually talks about how the non-compliance is the fault of the prescribing physician. He says that this is one of the many things that make psychologists so wonderful. We believe that the healthcare provider has a responsibility to make sure that the patient is following it. Well, whatever happened to self-responsibility there, right? Anyhow, what you'll find in Jordanetics, and this is something I've pointed out, is that the nominal rule is not what Peterson is really focusing on. Because after he begins with this after he begins with his statistical errors, and after he begins with failing to understand the numbers from the very study that he is citing, then he starts wandering off into the 5-part taijitsu and the source of the yin and yang. What does that have to do with any of this? What could it possibly have to do with any of this? He's diving off and he's going off. It's not even a tangent. He's wandering off into the reason that people don't take their medication, which doesn't even apply to 80% of the population, well, technically 79.6% of the population. The reason that they don't do this, he theorizes, is shame. They're ashamed. So then he wanders off and starts trying to connect shame to the taijitsu, to the yin and yang of the Tao, to the Star of David, to a Hindu hexagram that symbolizes Shakti and Shiva, the Om and Hum. Remarkable examples of conceptual parallelism. What does this have to do with medication? Nothing. It has literally nothing to do with it. But what it points to is one of Jordan Peterson's most foundational arguments, which is the idea that all religion is a unified field. He is assuming that all spiritual paths lead to enlightenment, and the differences between the various religions are all superficial. So what he's saying, what he means when he says religion is a unified field, and this is his big grand idea that no one's ever had before, according to him, is that the cosmos has a supernatural origin in a single unified source, one ruler, one creator, and all of man's religions actually agree on the identity and purpose of that creator. But remember, Peterson doesn't actually believe this. It's just a philosophical assumption for him. And so this is so utterly, directly contrary to Christian theology, to the Christian religion, and to genuine philosophy that it is hard to overestimate. Peterson is a less coherent version of Deepak Chopra in this regard. And then he goes on about the yin and the yang. Now this is just blasphemous. No Christian should pay any attention or give any respect to Jordan Peterson, whatever. Listen to this. The Taoist juxtaposition of yin and yang, doesn't simply portray chaos and order. It also tells you how to act. The way, the Taoist path of life, is represented by or exists on the border between the twin serpents. So suddenly now we're, getting into the Iliad and Scylla and Charybdis. The way is the path of proper being. It is the same way as that referred to by Christ in John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and life. No, absolutely not. That is absolutely false. And so the idea that the Taoist way is the same as Jesus Christ being the way, straight is the gate and narrow is the way that leadeth into life, that is not the middle path that Peterson is talking about. Anyhow, he goes on talking about being and contradicts himself repeatedly. Some of his fans like to claim that he's using being in the sense that Martin Heidegger did, except he isn't and he can't, because he keeps defining being in various contradictory ways. So it's just, you have to, if you want to know how full of nonsense Jordan Peterson is, the best way to do it is to do a word search on an ebook of his and simply write down each definition he provides for the same thing. And what you will find is that more often than not, the definitions that he provides for words are totally contradictory. And so he's going on about how being is chaos. And then he said, listen to this. He strongly suggests that chaos is neither being nor a mode of being. But then he says, chaos and order are two of the most fundamental elements of lived experience, two of the most basic subdivisions of being itself. So, how can something be either being or a mode of being and also simultaneously not be? It can't. He is absolutely violating the most basic foundations of philosophy dating back to Aristotle, dating back to Abelard, it is so or it is not. Well, not according to Jordan Peterson. According to Jordan Peterson, something can be and not be at the same time. It's nonsense. So anyhow, according to Peterson, being can be bad or good, inauthentic or real, a thing or not a thing, chaos or order. Does that make any sense to you? Of course not, because it's nonsensical. No wonder the guy has to take meds, So anyhow, what's interesting is that Rule 2 very clearly spells out that the metaphorical pill that you're supposed to be taking in order to surmount the shame that you feel as a fallen creature is religion. So he is pushing religion, but he's not talking about religion as you understand it or I understand it. He's not talking about Christianity. He is not talking about Islam. He's not talking about Judaism. He's talking about what he regards as the one true and authentic religion, the unified religion of being. So what is that? And what's interesting too is that, this is one of the reasons why I just loathe Jordan Peterson, is that he is actually appalled by the idea that people care about their pets. He is appalled by the idea that people love their pet animals more than they love themselves. The idea of self-sacrificial love is totally foreign to Peterson. And that's why he doesn't do things like defend his daughter when she's attacked, when she's little. That's why I don't think he's sociopathic, but he definitely doesn't understand the Christian concept of love and of self-sacrifice. And so, it's kind of astonishing. And, for those of you who have been following the stuff that I've been talking about recently and who know the extent to which my family has gone to try to preserve the life of my wife's beloved Ridgeback, can possibly understand how this perspective on Jordan Peterson's part is not just foreign to me, but is outright disgusting. Now, what's interesting is that Peterson keeps going even further afield. Now he gets into the story of the creation of man. He gets into Adam and Eve, the fall of sinlessness. He gets it wrong. He gets the Genesis account wrong. And then he makes what is one of the most ridiculous statements I've ever heard anyone who is even remotely educated make. He claims that before the dawn of the scientific worldview, reality was construed differently. He wrote that in Maps of Meaning, but he makes reference to it in 12 Rules for Life. And what he is saying is that prior to the development of modern science, that man did not think empirically. Now, this is totally ridiculous. Sextus Empiricus is where we get the idea of empiricism from. He was one of the original skeptics. And the Greeks, going back to Aristotle's Organon, it's a 3,000-page analysis of objective truth, the very kind of thing that Jordan Peterson claims doesn't exist. Now, how could Peterson even make a claim like that? How can Peterson claim that people were not addressing, thinking empirically and trying to address objective truth, what we now understand as objective truth? He claims that people were not doing that when Sextus Empiricus was doing it in the Outlines of Pyrrhonism 1,700 years prior to the time that Jordan Peterson is talking about. So how can he make this mistake? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Peterson has never read Sextus Empiricus. Peterson has never read, as far as I can tell, Aristotle. Peterson's never read Thomas Aquinas. He is very narrowly educated. If you go through Maps of Meaning, you will find out that there is not a single reference to Aristotle, not a single direct reference to Aristotle, to Sextus Empiricus, to the Stoics, to Marcus Aurelius. His knowledge is incredibly narrow and limited. So let's go on. Let's see here. Now, this is another thing that this is just kind of an amusing aside, but it tells you how narcissistic and limited Jordan Peterson is. Let me just read you this paragraph that I wrote. As anyone who has ever read the great Greek, Roman, or Chinese philosophers knows, as anyone who is familiar with the great Christian theologians and philosophers of the Middle Ages will recognize, it is massively false to assert that objective truth was invented circa 1518 AD, or that reality was construed differently before then. This leads the critical reader to wonder who, or what, could possibly be the source for this astonishingly incorrect claim. Guess who the claim is based upon. You know who Jordan Peterson really loves to cite, right? He loves to talk about Jung. He loves to talk about Nietzsche. He loves to talk about Solzhenitsyn. He likes to talk to Ben Shapiro and Joe Rogan and those guys. So who do you think he got the idea from? Jung, couple guesses here. Control Alt Debug. And Chad Thunderkokovich. I'm guessing you guys have read the book because he cites himself. He has a note on it. There's an endnote on it. Makes it look very official, right? The endnote on the page literally cites one J.B. Peterson. And the note says, I outlined this in some detail in Peterson, J.B., 1999, Maps of Meaning, the Architecture of Belief. So Peterson is trying to cite himself as the authority for this insanely stupid idea. I mean, this is worse than the New Atheists. With the New Atheists, Richard Dawkins was always quoting Sam Harris talking about Daniel Dennett, talking about Richard Dawkins. Or Sam Harris was praising the way that Richard Dawkins had cited a Sam Harris argument. But at least they were talking about other people. Peterson is literally making an appeal to his own authority, which those of you who enjoy that whole logical fallacy thing, actually, that's a good point. Arya Satya says, is this how he gets his citations? Well, it's definitely one of them. And so anyhow, so let's see here. Now, where we get to, where's he getting to here? Why is he talking about shame? Why is he talking about the serpent? And this is where the second important quote that I'm going to draw to your attention. Once having understood hell, researched it, so to speak, particularly your own individual hell, you could decide against going there or creating that. You could aim elsewhere. You could, in fact, devote your life to this. That would give you a meaning with a capital M. That would justify your miserable existence. That would atone for your sinful nature and replace your shame and self-consciousness with the natural pride and forthright confidence of someone who has learned once again to walk with God in the garden. That's a direct quote from 12 Rules for Life. That is the summation of rule number 2. And that is literally satanic. That is literally diabolical. What he's saying is that by simply diving into your own personal concept of hell and deciding to live your life in a way to avoid it, that will atone for your sins. That will replace your shame and self-consciousness with pride. That is wizardry. That is evil wizardry. That is literally Antichrist. It is anti-Christian, it is diabolical, and it is evil. It is the worship of yourself. The idea that you can transform and transcend your own fallen nature through your own actions and avoid your own hell. And then that will allow you to walk with God in the garden, the God that he does not even believe in. This is pure and unmitigated evil. And we're already able to see it in the second rule. Trust me, this gets considerably deeper, and this confirms this. Earl, you'd have no idea what you're talking about. You said, I think too much is being read into Rule 2. I am reading you Peterson's own words describing Rule 2. You are falsely, erroneously paying attention to the title. It's like saying, well, the book doesn't say that because it's not in the title. Look, if I write a long treatise on Rome and then I put a cover on it with a pretty girl and Fabio with his long hair blowing in the wind, and I call it, you know, heaving bosoms, a love story, does that mean that I've written a romance novel? No. No, absolutely not. And so, the idea that holy cow. Thanks, Chris. Um, the So the idea that the second rule involves medication is absolutely false. No, has been. I do not twist anything to my narrative. I read what Jordan Peterson wrote. I'm doing exactly the opposite of what all of Jordan Peterson's fans do. Jordan Peterson's fans ignore what he actually wrote, ignore what he actually said, and they interpret what they think they heard. So a lot of them actually think Rule 2 has to do with medication. It doesn't have anything to do with medication. Jordan Peterson didn't even correctly read the very study, the only study he cited. It has nothing to do with actually taking pills, which should be obvious because only 20% of the population even takes pills in the first place. All right? So once you accept and understand that we're talking about, that's the thing. I am not putting any spin on it. I am telling you exactly what he said, and that offends you because you don't want to accept it. But that's what he said. And listen to this now. This is the important thing. Remember that in the first chapter, he talked about how it's important not to choose either chaos or order. So what is chaos? He provides descriptions of chaos. He doesn't really describe it in the first rule, but in the second rule he does. This is what chaos is. Chaos is the domain of ignorance. It's unexplored territory. It's what extends beyond the boundaries of all states, all ideas, and all disciplines. It is the foreigner. It is the stranger, the enemy, the rustle in the bushes in the nighttime, the monster under the bed, the hidden anger of your mother, the sickness of your child. It is hell. It is the underworld. It is the Holocaust. It is a chasm. It is the abyss. Okay? So that is what he says in the second rule is chaos. So the opposite, the contrast to it, Peterson has stated, is order. Well, the opposite of all those things should be good, right? I mean, all of those things, the sickness of your child, hell, the Holocaust, shouldn't we be against those things? Well, here's how he defines order. Explored territory, the hierarchy of place, position, and authority, the structure of society, tribe, religion, hearth, home, and country, the warm, secure living room where the fireplace glows and the children play, the flag of the nation, the value of the currency. Thank you, Winter. He says, we don't deserve you, Vox. Keep doing what you're doing. Ain't no such thing as deserve, I think is the way that they put it. I'm just happy that there's people who are actually interested in listening to the truth as best we can understand it. So, but here's where we get. Don't those things sound good? Explored territory, structure of society, tribe, religion, hearth, home, and country. But remember, Peterson says too much chaos is bad, too much order is bad. So he's saying, no, you don't want to do either. You need to find that better order, that more preferential order, that order that is in between chaos and order. And what he's talking about there, this is where it starts to get almost silly, is that he's talking about the Force. He's talking about the Jedi religion. This is the philosophical and religious equivalent of midichlorians. Okay? This is the same nonsensical ethos that we see in bad fantasy novels, where too much good is good, or too much bad is bad, and too much good is bad. And so what Jordan Peterson is really saying is that the pill to alleviate the pain of human existence is this one true religion. And this true religion is the middle way. The spiritual path of the middle way is the only religion that works for those who have successfully risen up from the bottom to the middle. The antidote to chaos is not order. The antidote to chaos is maintaining the balance between order and chaos. And so that's why I reached the conclusion that the second principle of Jordanetics, the second true rule, the real rule underneath the superficial nominal rule, is that God is the balance between good and evil. And so, I'll get to that, Torn. And so I can't answer your question what this means yet, because we need to walk through the other rules. I'm not going to, yes, obviously I am capable of doing that. But let's keep it to one rule at a time. Okay. Lucas says, it's my friend's birthday. Can you give him a shout out? His name is Nick Gur. Happy birthday, Nick. I hope you're not a Jordan Peterson fan, but if you are, the truth is my gift to you today. So let's see here. Let's actually go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and that's the end of my chapter. But now you can see why I called it the bad math of balance. The balance is Jordan Peterson's religion. The balance is Jordan Peterson's ersatz God. And the balance in between those things, in between all the evils of chaos and all the good of order, the balance is where you have to be. And that's why he is the enemy of all that is good. He's the enemy of the nation. He's the enemy of the family. He's the enemy of the tribe, of the religion, of home and country. He's the enemy of Western civilization, because his philosophy requires him to be. So, Vox, you fell for the oldest trick. Say the name 3 times fast. Good point. I guess I guess it's probably a good thing that I'm so used to Italian pronunciations now. So anyhow, nice try though. So what we need to do is, we need to make sure that we take that guy out. So what we should, hang on a second. I need to switch over here to get into the, see the super chats and so forth. Here's a good question. Peterson's balance of chaos and order is dumb. What about Aristotle's golden mean, that the virtue of courage exists between cowardice and recklessness? Well, I think that's a very different thing, because cowardice is not the opposite of recklessness. You can be a reckless coward very easily. And so I think that I don't think that it's at all strange to say that something can be found in the middle of two concepts. But what you can't say is that truth is to be found in the middle of truth and falsehood. I mean, there's a reason that Peterson never actually describes his balance. He refers to it literally as a more perfect order. To him, in between chaos and order is a more perfect order. How does that make any sense? And so, but that's why it's so important to read what people say carefully, to read what they say so that you understand what they are actually talking about. The more that you look and read what people are actually saying, the easier it is to see through the falsehoods. All right, there we go. Just cleaning things up here a little bit. Okay, so let's make sure that I get to these questions. Okay, Jordan Herman, thank you. Ascari Ray says, the three best nonfiction books written about World War I and World War II. The classic one about World War II is The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shirer. I really like Stalingrad, which I believe was written by Anthony Beevor. He's a lefty, but it's a really good history. I would also look at reading Churchill's history of World War II. It's obviously biased, but it's very interesting, and you get insights that you would never ever see. Something that's written by one of the actual major actors there. Relic Bear says, the narrator for Jordanetics did a really good job imitating your voice and Peterson's voice. It was a really nice listening experience. That's great. I thought he did a really good job too. If you haven't read the book yet, if you're an auditory learner, the link to the Jordanetics audiobook is below the video. I highly recommend listening to it. I personally prefer to read, but I do understand that a lot of people prefer to listen, and so that's why we made sure that we did both. Raccoon wants to know, why does the left hate him as the right does? The reason is because they believe the press, just like a lot of his right-wing fans do. They believe that he is right-wing. They believe that he's a Christian. He's not. They are fooled by him too, and so they buy into him as the fake opposition. To them, fake opposition looks real. So he's the opposition, and so they're opposed to him. James Livey says, do you think the Bezos divorce has anything to do with avoiding antitrust action from being taken against Amazon? I very much doubt it. I think that Bezos, he was known, according to Crazy Days and Nights, Bezos was actually known to be using escorts and whatnot fairly heavily. And the fact that he has publicly taken up with a female predator, like the woman that he is apparently involved with, I don't think that there's a lot of thinking or business strategy involved in any way, shape, or form. The Dashing Rogue says, JBP puts rhetoric before his grammar, trivium-wise. Well, yeah, what you have to understand is that everything that Peterson says is rhetorical. He's not a dialectic thinker. He's not a dialectic speaker. He's not even dialectically competent. We saw that in his statistical ineptitude when he tried to write about who was not taking their pills. We saw how inept he is when it comes to dialectic and numbers when he addressed the question of Ashkenazi Jewish intelligence. He's not capable. He is very good at inspiring emotions. He's remarkably skilled at that. That's why people respond to him, because he utilizes this technique of preemptive mirroring. So that, some of the people here on the chat refused to believe what Peterson was actually writing, because they were so convinced that what he was talking about was what they imagined that he was talking about, rather than what he literally wrote. Wotan005 says, pretty soon you'll be getting Killstream numbers box. Okay, that would be cool. Derek J says, maybe I'm blind, but when I search on your blog, I only find a 2016 best of book list. Do you have a more up-to-date suggested reading list? I didn't do one. I really didn't do one for 2017 or for 2018. It started to get a little bit uncomfortable, because I like to be honest about what editor of books that we're publishing. I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to express my opinion about books written by our own authors. And so I've kind of gotten away from doing that. Now I'm just sort of keeping track of what I write, or of what I read. Daniel Paul says, he who doesn't understand the love of pets reeks of satanic sulfur. I totally agree. One of the reasons why Space Bunny and I are together is because of our mutual love of dogs. On our first date, we actually ended up arranging so that we could meet each other's dogs as well. And our second date was actually just taking the dogs out together for a walk. So when you see worthy of a dog's love and loyalty, you have at least some idea that they are a decent person. A jerk, but there are 5 types of love in the Bible. Yeah, agape and, all that sort of thing. That's true. But, the greatest love, it says in the Bible too, greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friend. So, I don't have quite that much love for my wife's dog, but, the idea that, for example, when we had dinner on New Year's Eve, we were doing Chinese fondue, and, for the first time in a long time, the dog was interested. I have to admit, I started it, but Space Bunny was like, as soon as she saw he was interested, she was practically, shoveling the stuff into him. And I looked at her, I said, this is not cheap meat. And she just gave me this look and said, he can have my share. I was like, no, go ahead. If he wants it, just, go for it. And our friend who was sitting next to me leaned over and said, just be thankful the dog doesn't want human flesh, because she'd be slicing it off her arms if need be. Poutine Connoisseur says, does the USA have to collapse for globalism to die? Probably. Chris Hicks, who put in 100, said 100 towards the 500 required for another wine stream. Any other contributors towards the $500 goal? Well, thanks very much. I think that I will. Actually, I think we know. Which one we're gonna have to. Not this. We've already done that one. I got a gift from my friend who actually picked up the reserve of that and brought it for Christmas. Plus, this was like really exciting. Wait, that's the same thing. Where's the other one? There it is. this is really exciting. This was the the priorat. It's the first priorat from Torres, and so very very excited about that. Charlemagne says that passage is explicitly satanic, and yet people will still pretend like you are adding your own interpretation. He literally says to go into hell. Well, exactly, exactly. The Winter says, read that before, we don't deserve you, Vox. Keep doing what you're doing. I think I could just as easily say that I don't deserve you guys. You know, I think that loyalty needs to run both ways. I don't buy into the whole. I mean, honestly, I just don't buy into the whole concept of fame, whatever that is. Um, Daniel, Daniel said, deserves got nothing to do with it. Clint Eastwood, Unforgiven. Great line. Obviously, that's what I was citing. See, Jordan Peterson cites himself. I cite Clint Eastwood. There's the fundamental difference between us. Torrin McCabe, we addressed that one about Aristotle's golden mean. Lord of Mistral says, have you gotten in touch with Jade Dyer? Yes, we have exchanged email. Kate Adams says, always enjoy your blog posts, Darkstreams, and Voxiversities. Thanks. You're quite welcome. By the way, I forgot to mention, we have the podcasts now available. Thanks to a volunteer, he's taken that task on, and he's already put up a number of Darkstreams, and we're going to be releasing the Voxiversities as audiobooks. Jordan Peterson's hot cousin, who everyone has agreed has the best name of everybody in the chat, says, remember to balance temperance with gluttony. That sounds like something that Samuel, what's his name, would have said. I don't know who said that. But Poutine Connoisseur says, Macron démission. Macron should resign. Yes, I agree. Dura Lex Sedlex says, it makes sense if he's actually talking about the right hand and left hand and right hand paths, which would make sense given the references to automatic writing. Exactly, and we will get into that as we continue through the book. Anaf Habib says, if God is the balance between good and evil, then Peterson would have to adopt Protagoras' satanic man is the measure of all things, since only man can, via choice, forego the good and choose evil. Well, I think that Peterson probably has adopted that, although probably in ignorance, because I see no evidence that he's ever read Protagoras or really any of the Greeks other than maybe just a little bit of Plato. Charles Carson says, thanks for the Darkstreams. And Slamurai Jamdown is transforming this into a dev stream, as he says, what do you think about Unity versus Spatial OS? Too long don't read. Unity removed their license. Seems that TOS is unclear enough to push out possible competitors in spaces. Unity is expanding too. Reinstalling reinstalling UE4. I think he meant deinstalling it. Yeah, I think that Epic is going to take advantage of this. They're already moving to take advantage of it. I think it's a major mistake on Unity's part, and I was not at all happy to see that. I haven't really looked into it more, but it doesn't look good to me. So, okay, we can close that down. So, let's go on here. Plato is for gammas. I tend to agree increasingly. I was having dinner with a Italian admiral about 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. And you have to understand that the elite in the Italian military tend to be very philosophical. They tend to be very well educated. And we were talking about politics, and he said, when it comes down to it, all political and philosophical arguments are the same. It is always and will always be Plato versus Aristotle. Obviously, I am a strong Aristotelian. Just as clearly, Peterson is on the side of Plato. Interesting Talk says Peterson is satanic because he leads people away from God to feed his own vanity. Pathetically, he hates himself for this. He is wretched. I think he hated himself first. I think that he sold his soul, and I think he knows it. And I think that he is attempting to, I know he is attempting to lead people away from Christianity. He's attempting to lead people away from nationalism. We will get into that. But all of this holds together. As incoherent as he is, it all holds together. This whole critique, this whole explanation of Peterson, his writings and his actions, they all hold together and make sense. And if you read Jordanetics, or if you listen to Jordanetics, I think you will see that. Skybreaker88 agrees, says, thanks for the JP talks and the book. I always knew there was something off. I just couldn't put it into words the way you do. Well, the problem is that Peterson is very good at baffle-garble. He's very good at making things sound intelligent that aren't. He's very good at deceiving people because he is a habitual liar. Jilly Bear asks, do you think the more that he is exposed for what he truly is, that JBP inches ever closer to flat-out suicide? I have no idea. We don't know what he was under medication for. But I do think that he would be well advised to stop posing as a teacher and to stop claiming to have any deep insight or understanding, and to get down on his knees and repent for the things that he has done that clearly are eating away at whatever remains of his soul. Vox, have you come across Anatoly Fomenko and the idea that our accepted historical chronology is incorrect? I don't know about him specifically, but I do. I have come across the idea of the lost years. Dan Rain says, I'm relatively new to the Bible and Christianity. Can you repent for sins and be saved even if you've sold your soul? I believe so, because I don't believe that, if you think about it, when we talk about redemption, when we talk about a divine advocate, we're talking about somebody who has a prior claim on our souls if we accept that gift of sacrifice and advocacy. Patrick Charles says, I know this is highly unlikely, but imagine Peterson repented due to Vox's writing on him. That'd be wonderful. He's a talented guy. He could probably do a lot to serve God if he chose to serve God rather than serving himself or serving the prince of this world. I agree with Andrew. He says, I doubt Jordan Peterson will declare war on Vox, rather not highlight him. Same with Shapiro. I think he's mentioned Vox once recently as alt-right, never addressed any arguments. Well, yeah, of course, they're cowards. They're cowards. They know their arguments are weak. They know their arguments are based on falsehoods, and they don't want anything to do with anyone who speaks the truth. The mere fact that Shapiro is buddy-buddy with someone should be enough to make you wonder about that person. Ginger Bean says, I got a VIP to see Peterson a while ago, but I left and didn't shake his soft hand. I got a weird vibe from the whole thing. Also, I waited on Jeff Bezos and family a couple of times. He's short. Well, we all know what that means, right? But I think that's good, because clearly you have a sense of spiritual discernment. Somebody with a strong sense of spiritual discernment is going to detect some of the issues with Jordan Peterson, because I believe that he is involved to some extent, and possibly to a deep extent, with the occult. No, Space Bunny is not the YouTuber Space Bunny. All right, well, thanks you for tuning in. Thanks for the super chats. That was astonishing, frankly. I had no idea that I had no idea that there was that level of enthusiasm, but I hope that you enjoy the content, and I hope to continue to improve it. So if you haven't picked up Jordanetics yet, you can find it at archavencomics.com and on KDP and at Castelia Direct. Paperback, ebook, audiobook, all the formats. The links are below the video. So thanks to the VFM, to the Dread Ilk, to the Ilk, to the Legion, and of course to the Bears. Have a good evening. I am going to catch the rest of the Rams-Cowboys game. Have a good evening. This has been the Darkstream.